Okay. So it's 5 after already. I think we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully if people are still coming in, Tim can help out and make sure they make their way onto the Google Meet. So thank you for being with us tonight. My name is Jo Resinetti. I'm going to be starting off with some of the information about what's happened up to this point, and then I'm going to pass things over to Tim so that he can go through some points on the Leto application. So this session is to help us prepare for the Leto public hearing, which is going to start next week on Wednesday, February 22nd at 6 p.m. in the American Legion. This meeting is being recorded and will be made public. So if you don't want to be on the recording, the easiest thing to do is down at the bottom of the screen, there's a little picture of a video camera. You can click that and turn your video off, and then we won't see you and you won't be on the recording. Also, there's the little microphone there. If you could mute yourself whenever you're not speaking, that would be helpful. And you can also turn on closed captions with the CC in the little box. It's actually pretty accurate and helpful there. Raise hand and reactions too if you need them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Leto application first, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask any questions about that portion, and then we'll go through some details about what to expect from the public hearing next week, and then have another time for questions about that at the end. So if you think of something that you want to ask, make a note so that you don't forget as I drone on through my slides. So Tim, could you advance to the next one? So this is the Olympus Energy Midas well pad in Plum Borough. Olympus Energy is the operator that has applied to construct well pads in West Deer. So this is similar to what we expect they would build in West Deer. This is an existing pad that's right across the river from Oakmont. Olympus is a fairly new driller. They just started drilling in 2017. And notably, the third well that they ever drilled was on this pad and was presumed responsible for contaminating 2 private water wells nearby. Next slide. So this is just a brief introduction to CROWD, the concerned residents of West Deer. We have a listing of our goals there. And if you're joining us for the first time, again, welcome. We do not take a position on fracking as an organization, which is something that we always like to be very clear about right up front. Our goal from the start has been to make sure that these applications for the well pads comply with the township ordinances. So we're not making a judgment about whether the practice of fracking is good or bad or needed or unnecessary or anything like that. It's just about whether the plans that Olympus Energy has submitted comply with township ordinances. And we've been at this for a couple years now, educating the community and decision makers about what has been submitted in the applications, what's in the ordinance, and trying to apply pressure so that there's transparency in the decision-making process and that the community doesn't end up waking up one morning with something, bulldozers moving dirt around and not having any idea that this decision was in process. Next slide. So Olympus Energy, the operator that has made these applications, I guess was originally Huntley and Huntley or broke off of Huntley and Huntley, but that might be a name that you've heard around because they started off in 1912 drilling conventional wells. And a lot of the leases that you'll see in this area are Huntley and Huntley leases. Then in 2012, so that they could start getting into unconventional drilling, they started a subsidiary called Huntley and Huntley Energy Exploration and drilled that first well in 2017. Right after the issue that I talked about when we were looking at the picture of the well pad where the driller was presumed responsible for contaminating the private water wells, Huntley and Huntley announced that they were changing their name to move in a new direction and issued a press release changing their name to Olympus Energy. So these applications that were submitted in West Deer are so old at this point that the company was still known as Huntley and Huntley Energy Exploration. And so some of the documents still say that on them, even though now the company is known as Olympus Energy. Olympus is a privately held, limited liability corporation that's registered in Wilmington, Delaware. Their headquarters are in Canonsburg, PA. And another notable thing about Olympus is that they're a general contractor in the industry. They don't do any of this work themselves. They hire subcontractors for every phase of the project. Next slide. This is a brief overview illustration. We're not going to go really in depth on the technologies here, but conventional drilling, like I described, Huntley and Huntley has been doing since 1912, is whenever a vertical shaft is drilled down into a pocket of gas, and then that gas is extracted from the pocket. Since a lot of the gas in our area is trapped in the shale, they developed the technique that is known as unconventional hydraulic fracturing, where they drill about a mile down vertically, and then the drill turns and they drill as much as 4 miles out horizontally from where they went underground. Then they set off charges to fracture the rock, and under high pressure, they put fracking fluid down underground, fracture the shale, which releases the gas from the shale, and then the gas comes up. So the surface footprint of unconventional drilling is a lot bigger than conventional wells. There are thousands of conventional wells all around us, and they're small and we don't notice them. A lot of them are leaking excessive amounts of methane, but that's another issue. Unconventional drilling, the drills that they have to bring in are so big to have to go that deep, and you know, all the pressure that's needed. So they have to create this big, 300 by 500 pad for all of the equipment that's required for the process. Did you have anything you wanted to add there, Tim?
Yeah, you can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
When Joe mentioned about the size of the surface disturbance, the typical size of an unconventional well pad is about 3 football fields large, 3 football fields, about 500 feet by 350 feet. And that is the size that's proposed for the Leto well pad here in West Deer Township. So whereas I'll talk a little bit more about the specific Leto site and how large it actually is, but that's probably about the only thing I think I'll add.
Okay, so you can advance to the next slide. What happened? Oh, okay. What happens and what happened so far?
I double tapped, sorry.
This is an overview of what has gone on in the process with these applications. Olympus Energy submitted 2 applications for 2 separate deep well sites in November of 2019. Tim and I found out about the applications in January of 2020. And at that time, the Planning Commission had Olympus Energy had come to a couple of West Deer Planning Commission meetings about the applications. Tim and I attended one of those meetings, and then the pandemic occurred. And at that time, the township closed to the public, stopped having meetings, and the application process went on an extended period of delay. So through the combination of pandemic delays and just Olympus Energy not being ready to proceed with the applications, it took them a long time to get through just the first phase, which was the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is a recommending body that is supposed to be the very technical part of the township process that really digs into the application and looks at it and compares it to the ordinance and makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors about whether or not all of the application materials are present and whether it meets the ordinance. So the Planning Commission, when they eventually voted, they voted to not recommend the Leto well site. They did recommend the Dionysus well site, which was the other well pad application. The Dionysus public hearing went first, starting in August of 2021. It lasted 9 sessions, which was pretty unprecedented at the time for a well pad hearing. There was such an outpouring of public interest in it and so many people that were parties to the hearing that it took a really long time to get through it. Since then, Olympus has been through hearings in several other communities that have gone on just as long. So I think Olympus is getting a little more used to this level of public involvement and scrutiny on their applications. The Board of Supervisors voted to deny the Dionysus well site, which was to be located off of Middle Road Extension. That decision was made in December of 2021, and the denial is currently under appeal. It was first appealed by Olympus to the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, who upheld West Deer's denial, and currently it is making its way through Commonwealth Court. So the Dionysus decision and subsequent appeal seem to have further held up the Leto hearing. And so we are only now getting ready to start the whole process for those of you who have been here for a while, went through the Dionysus process, and now we get to start it all over again with Leto, basically. And now I'll turn it over to Tim for an overview of the Leto project application files.
You didn't want to pause for any questions right now, did you?
Not till after your part.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I am Tim Restinetti. I'm Joe's husband. And I'm going to go through some specific details to try to make everybody, get everybody on the same page as to what we're talking about with the specific Leto project. I see that we have some people who've joined us via the phone, so I'm going to try to describe as best I can some of the images. If there's any questions, I don't mind you jumping off a mute and shouting something out if I'm not clear about anything. So feel free. Don't worry. I'm fine with you interrupting. Okay, so the first slide here, this is one of Olympus's exhibits. This is known as their setback exhibit, is what they've called it. This is prepared by them, and this shows the location of the well pad and the entire site in relation to Bairdford. So the probably one of the most identifiable landmarks in the area is the Dollar General in Bairdford. So I'm trying to circle it with my mouse. So the Dollar General off of Oak Road is directly adjacent to the access road. The access road is approximately midway between the Dollar General and the abandoned mine drainage treatment pond that is on Oak Road. So it travels north off of Oak Road. I believe it's about 1,700 feet long. I didn't pull that exact number out of the application for this, but it's about 1,700 feet, if I'm not mistaken, back to the well pad. The well pad is located on the former Berry Mine property. It's now owned by a person that lives in it's either Baden or Economy Borough. I'm not sure the landowner where the surface disturbance will be off the top of my head. But the well pad itself, as I mentioned, is about 500 feet by 350 feet, essentially 3 football fields. The entire site, the amount of land that will see earth disturbance is 17.3 acres. The application itself allows for 5 wells on the well pad. That number, we've heard it change a lot, so I wouldn't Oh, Baden, thank you, Kara. Um, the number of wells, like I said, the application says it covers 5 wells. The number of wells could actually reach much higher, up to 13 or more. We'll probably hear some testimony to that during the hearing itself. But the plan is to at least initially drill 5 wells. The property itself, that where this site will be, is what's known as the industrial district in West Deer Township. Most of the surrounding homes are located in West Deer's most densely populated residential district, known as R4, or urban residential. Most of those homes are also located in what's known as a village overlay. So to describe and give you some idea of distances, there's some red lines shown on this drawing with arcs at the end. Those lines are 650 feet long, each of them. That's significant because that's pulled straight from our ordinance. There's a setback requirement of 650 feet between the well site and buildings. So when you look at Locust, the well pad itself is a little bit more than 650 feet, but the whole site is actually less than some of the homes along Locust. Coming off of Hemlock, it's actually closer to Hemlock. The arc of that 650 feet basically touches the corner of the well pad, which is a couple hundred feet off of the edge of where earth disturbance will occur. This next slide, there we go. It skipped one on me. Okay. So this is one impact residents will face, if approved, will be long periods of heavy truck traffic along the haul route, mostly along Bairdford Road. So a traffic impact study that the Planning Commission asked Olympus to perform provided this haul route map.
Tim, did you mean Oak Road?
What did I say? Yeah, I'm saying Bairdford Road. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I meant Oak Road. Thanks, Joe. So the haul route proposed for this site comes off of originates at the intersection of Route 910 and Route 8, traveling all the way down Route 910 to Oak Road, and then traveling up Oak Road to the access road in the area of the Dollar General. So this is important because the traffic impact study provided by Olympus, which I'll show here. I'll jump to the next slide. So these are the tables shown are pulled directly from the traffic impact study prepared for Olympus Energy by Stultz Schaefer Engineering. So the highest frequency of truck traffic would occur during what they call completions of fracking. So this is the actual stage. This comes after drilling. This is where they're actually fracturing the shale underground. And they're anticipating as many as 1,084 truck trips, heavy truck trips per day. That averages out to a heavy truck every 90 seconds, 24 hours a day for about 2.5 months. So that would be all night long, all day long, on weekends, on holidays, whenever this is occurring. Now, there's another number provided that's if Olympus is able to pipe water in. So that heavy truck traffic is made up of a couple things. It's water tankers coming in to bring water to the site, and then there's also the return trip where they leave. Sand trucks, and those two types of truck make up the most amount of that. So if they're able to pipe the water in, they anticipate that number goes down from 1,084 to 600 trucks per day. So that's even if they are able to get down to 600 trucks per day, that's a heavy truck every 24 minutes throughout, again, all hours of the day. So if you live in proximity, which I know a lot of us do, to Oak Road, you're probably going to hear those trucks more on approximately, a little bit under a half hour all through the night. So Olympus's history indicates that drilling and completion operations are likely to recur every 18 to 24 months. So just remember that this isn't a one-time, one and done, suffer through it for a few months type of a situation, and you'll never have to suffer through it again. Like I said, even if they come and they drill 5 wells to begin with, I would expect at least 2 more rounds of drilling to occur every 1.5 to 2 years. So the disturbance that would happen to the community would recur. So if somebody tells you this is temporary, it sort of is temporary, but it's going to recur.
I had a note on this slide too, Tim, about the anticipated start dates that are listed.
Yes, good.
It lists construction as September 2023. And I just wanted to note that each time Olympus came to the Planning Commission, they had different dates for Leto's start. At one point, they were into 2027 with when they intended to start construction on the site. So that'll be one of the things that we'll be interested to hear when the hearing starts next week, when they are anticipating constructing this site.
Thank you. I did mean to bring that up. So this traffic information study was done probably close to 3 years ago at this point. So yeah, those anticipated start dates, not likely to be the same at this point. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about basically Olympus's emergency response plan. This slide is pulled directly from the emergency response plan that Olympus supplied with its application. The smaller orange circle is labeled as the 1/2 mile evacuation buffer and includes Oak Road to the west, past Dillner Lane, Bairdford Road to the east, past the post office, as far north as about a 1/4 mile past Lick Road, and south to include parts of Wagon Wheel Lane. The yellow circle is labeled as the 1 mile evacuation buffer. This is a 3.14 square mile area with an approximate population of around 1,000 people. That's close to 10% of the population of West Deer. One notable fact is that some Olympus ERPs, or emergency response plans, only require a 1/2 mile evacuation buffer. But for reasons that aren't exactly known to us, the Leto and the Dionysus both required the additional 1 mile buffer. Something to know is that our county, Allegheny County, has a hazard mitigation plan, which West Deer Township adopted, and it has defined 3,000 feet, so a little bit more than a 1/2 mile, as being, and this is their words, quote, vulnerable to oil and gas well incidents, end quote. And the DEP uses 3,000 feet as its, quote, zone of culpability for oil and gas incidents. All of this is to say that despite any verbal assurances anyone gives you, Olympus themselves, Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, and the township all acknowledge that there are risks associated with living in proximity to oil and gas wells. One more thing I wanted to add on this last slide about the emergency response plan circles. Anyone living within these circles has reason to believe they will be impacted by this application and therefore has a legal right to participate as a party to the hearing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later for what that specifically means. But in short, someone has proposed an operation here in West Deer and drawn a circle around your home that they've called an evacuation buffer. So I personally find that concerning. I would expect many of you do as well. As for exactly what those risks are or how likely they are to occur, I can tell you this. Olympus has an extensive history of violating state law, which includes spills, discharging pollution into waters of the Commonwealth, erosion and sedimentation failures, including causing landslides, and the most concerning problems with wells themselves and property destruction. Olympus experienced a blowout in 2019 where they lost control of a well while fracking for over 10 hours. They have had violations for not properly casing and cementing wells. The image above is from an incident they had this past Christmas where they destroyed a home just across the border in Westmoreland County. A 3,500-pound section of pipe left their site and traveled about 700 feet into a home, blasting through 3 concrete walls and filling the home with gas. Fortunately, the family was away for Christmas and no one was injured, but Olympus didn't even know this had happened until the homeowner returned home several days later to find his house filled with gas, the foundation destroyed, and had to basically call 911 himself to say something happened to his home. Now, the gas that filled the home was because when the pipe blasted through, it broke gas lines. So the pipe itself wasn't shooting gas into the home, just to be clear. So this is, you might call it a freak accident. But if you, my personal opinion, when you look at Olympus's history of violating state law, from things that are, might be slightly less concerning, all the way up to the very concerning items like having a well blowout and damaging homes. There's a pattern that exists that, and I personally believe that if you're careless in little things, you're likely to be careless in big things. And I believe that this incident here with the pipe destroying the home is an example of just what you can expect when your history, your track record is as bad as a company like Olympus's is. So the next slide provides an approximate area as to where the extraction zone for the proposed wells in West Deer will occur. So this shows both the Dionysus and the Leto well. The underlying information or facts going into this is the horizontal drilling associated with fracking the Marcellus Shale formation. The drilling always goes basically northwest and southeast. So that's just because of geological certainties that exist where the fault lines are in the shale. So that's how you can approximate where they're going to drill. So these lines go out, I meant to look, I believe they're about 1.5 miles and about maybe a 1/2 mile lateral. So if you're wondering where the gas, or is this stuff going to be underneath your home, these areas give you a pretty good representation of where that will occur. And we know from the leasing activity Olympus has been doing, these are a pretty good estimate of what, who stands to benefit financially from it. Now back to you, Joe.
Yes, so I just wanted to talk briefly about health impacts associated with fracking. Research has shown that people living within 1 mile of well sites and even further suffer health impacts from them. Within 1 mile, the health impacts can be nosebleeds, nausea, shortness of breath. If you are interested in exploring more about the health impacts, a very good resource is the Physicians for Social Responsibility Compendium of Scientific, Medical, and Media Findings Demonstrating Risks and Harms of Fracking and Associated Gas and Oil Infrastructure. One thing that's important to note, even though the health impacts are extremely concerning, under state law, the West Deer Township oil and gas ordinance that's already on the books is presumed to be protective of residents' health, safety, and welfare. So the potential health impacts are not a reason the township can cite to deny the Leto well pad. Whenever they enacted the ordinance, they were required by law to think about how far this needed to be from people to keep them safe and minimize the health impacts. And what they decided at that time was 650 feet from the deep well site. People living near well pads like the one planned in West Deer have reported health problems from the air emissions from the well pad itself, as well as health impacts from the traffic, noise, vibration, and light from the site. Not everyone that lives near fracking sites experiences these problems, but there are people who have been significantly impacted. The most acute impacts are to vulnerable populations, children, and the elderly. And it stands to reason that often the more acute impacts are felt the closer you are to the well pad. Another note to make that's important to file away for the future is that West Deer Township is looking at a complete revision to their code of ordinances. We expect in May the Board of Supervisors could be voting on a new oil and gas ordinance. So anyone who is concerned with health impacts and safety from operations like this should follow along to make sure that you bring those concerns to the Board of Supervisors whenever they're thinking about revising the distance of where they can place something like this. You definitely can bring up your health concerns in the public hearing, but since the supervisors can't use those health concerns in their decision, a lot of times you'll hear our solicitor, Gavin Robb, who we'll talk more about in the next section about the public hearing, sort of redirect you and sort of reiterate this sense that it's kind of already decided and we don't talk about the health stuff during the public hearing. The state of Pennsylvania has a presumption of safety that they've determined that fracking can be placed alongside agricultural uses and residences. And so that's why they only allow the township to use those distances that they've already determined during the public hearing. I feel like I didn't do a great job explaining that. So
If I could add something real quick, Joe.
Sure.
So Joe says that the potential health impacts are not a reason a township can use to deny the Leto well pad. That's true on one level, but also not true on another. And it comes down to, I don't want to get too technical into the way hearings work, but there are burdens that the applicant has to meet, and then there would be burdens that objector parties would have to meet. So for the township to deny the application based on health impacts, they could do it, but objectors would have to provide evidence to indicate that the health impacts associated with Olympus's operations, perhaps in general, or specifically to what they plan to do at the Leto well pad, would have health impacts beyond what would be typically expected of the same use, so of a well pad or of fracking operations. And it's just a really high burden to try to meet. You would potentially have to try to find health experts to come in and testify. There isn't. It's a very high burden to meet. So that's the reason I think that Joe has listed as it's not a reason the township can use. It's mostly not a reason the township can use to deny it. But again, we encourage you to express your concerns, no matter what they are, whether they're health related, noise related, whatever impacts you expect or you think might happen from this well pad. You should definitely, this hearing that's coming up that starts next week, this is the place to express those concerns to the people we've elected, and we know some of them are appointed as well, to our Board of Supervisors. So we don't want to discourage you in any way, shape, or form to expressing your own concerns in your own words. So do you want the next slide, Joe?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and this is a slide that I always include for people. There are still people that live around the Leto well site that have private well water. There's a program out of Duquesne University that Dr. Stoles will come out and test your water before drilling as part of his Western Pennsylvania water quality survey, no cost to the homeowner. So if you have well water and you're interested to know the quality of your well water, you know, even if the drilling never happens, Dr. Stoles will come and do that testing. So that phone number is 412-396-4367 to get in touch with Duquesne University and that water testing program. This one was for you, Tim.
It sure was. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm not going to go too far into detail on this, but there are legitimate reasons that our township can use to deny this application, and this is kind of the whole point of crowd existing, is to inform not only our neighbors, but also to help our Board of Supervisors make those better decisions. So we expect Olympus to take a position that it does comply, that their application complies with the ordinance. If they took a different position, why would they even apply it in the first place, right? But just because they take that position and they say it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. In this case, there's strong evidence to indicate that the site does not comply with the 650 foot setback requirement from buildings. This is similar to the issues we saw with the Dionysus application. This is one of the reasons that Dionysus was denied. So we expect consistency out of our board. There is now legal precedence for how we interpret our ordinance. So this is a strong argument, I'll say, as to why, as to how we can reasonably expect or ask our supervisors to deny the application. There are some other details about missing items in the application. So our ordinance, which if you're interested in reading it, you can get to our Code of Ordinances from West Deer Township's webpage. You would want to look in the zoning section, which I believe is section 210, and then the oil and gas section is in 210-120, and then the oil and gas section of 210-120 is, I think it's paragraph 25. So I don't know if anybody's interested in reading that, but that information is available, and you can certainly contact Joe or I, through Crowd, through Facebook, however you can get a hold of us, and we're happy to point you in the direction of doing your own research on these things. So I had mentioned a little bit about burdens earlier. The burden is on Olympus Energy to demonstrate that they comply with every single ordinance requirement. So there are requirements for noise, vibration, light, and a plethora of other things. So if they don't meet their burden, legally speaking, on every single one of those, the board has no choice but to deny the application. Now, they can obviously vote however they want. The check on that is that either any party can appeal the decision. And I think our board will be expecting an appeal no matter what they decide. So there's every reason for them to side with their neighbors, you and me, all of us who live here, and also the people that they'll be running for election, asking us to vote for them. So there's good reason to participate in this hearing, to bring all this stuff up and help our electeds make what we think will be the right decision for West Deer.
Okay, so this is the end of the Leto application details part. So if anybody had any questions about all of that we covered.
I'll stop sharing so that you can see our faces if you want. So feel free, jump in, anybody who wants, raise a hand or just shout something out. Make sure to unmute.
Joe, I had a question to start with. Do you remember, either of you, why the Planning Commission chose to recommend not approving Leto? I forget what that reason was.
So we had a really good turnout of the public at that meeting.
Mhm.
You were probably there, Jack. I don't know.
I was, but I don't remember why the Planning Commission chose not to. So they did.
I think it was because there are so many residences within a half mile of that site.
Okay.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
The head of the planning commission, what was his name? Mark
Schmidt.
Schmidt.
Chairman.
Yeah, I remember that was his, when we asked him that question directly, that was his response, that it was too close to population, large population.
It also is in due large part to showing a lot of public interest. So I really encourage everyone, show up at the hearings, participate. We'll help you in every way that we can. All you have to do is ask us. But showing that you care about this is probably the biggest thing that we can do at this moment. Tara, did you have a question for us?
Where'd she go? Tara.
I think we maybe lost her. Maybe she's having a bad connection. Well, she might pop back in later. She's been a little in and out.
I did have a comment or two. Just wanted to expound on a couple of things you already said. But the one thing you were talking about, the reasons to deny, and I do remember from the Dionysus that the ordinance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim or Joe, the ordinance also states that the conditional use cannot affect the normal flow of traffic on township roads. And the traffic study, as they presented it, was very deficient. And I think we proved that, in that it didn't study how the traffic was actually going to flow on the road. And we proved that they would be, for middle road extension, causing the road to be unusable at least 50 to 60% of the time. And so that could be another thing that people should be aware of as far as effects go. At least that's my memory.
There were, there's a lot to it, and we had kind of thought that for the purposes of tonight, we were giving an overview, and then if anybody wanted to dig deeper into that sort of thing, we would, plan on having a separate meeting to avoid getting too far off into the weeds. I think Tara put her question in the chat.
Okay, so Tara's asking,
yeah, I think that might be
the sanitary line, which runs right behind the proposed well. Isn't that a bit of a problem? It's not a problem I'm aware of. Let me put it that way. I can look on. There's this application is pretty large. I can look at drawings and see if it's included on a drawing, and if it's in the area where the earth disturbance will occur. So
these are the kind of things that you would want to remember to ask, and then you can have your questions ready for the appropriate, Olympus calls them their experts. But the first person that they present will most likely be the person who prepared the site plans.
yeah.
And they should be able to answer questions like that.
So I'll just answer you real quick, Tara. I'm looking at their one of their drawings. It looks like the existing sanitary sewer is outside of their limit of disturbance. So they shouldn't be driving equipment over it. They should be a fair ways away from it.
I had another question. The Stoltz water test that you mentioned, do you happen to know, does that have the traceability that's needed for the legal requirement if there was a problem, or is that still
No, that's just for your knowledge and peace of mind.
Okay. So if you knew like where we are, if they put Dionysus in, we would have to go to like Penn State then to get a traceable water test, which cost about $750 last I checked.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, should we go on? Kara has a question.
Kara had another question, and then Kara has a hand raised. The bonding. Do you remember what the bonding requirements were? Their haul routes are not using township roads. So I believe any bonding is with the state, right?
Let me do a quick search of their narrative and see if they talk about bonding. So certification evidence of bonding requirements. So their position is that since the project does not anticipate to use township roads, Olympus, basically there's no bonding requirement with the township because they're not using our roads.
Oak Road is a state road. And
Right.
their haul route is from the site to Oak Road to 910.
And
So
Tara has another question about, does the township require a gas company to bond? Okay, that's we just covered. Oh, and then Tara didn't have a question. Okay.
I think Tim Young has a hand raised too, though.
Yes, I have two questions. The 650-foot setback, what's the current discussion? What do they want to change that to?
So the last we heard, there was a workshop meeting among some of the supervisors that I was present in. They want to change the wording. So instead of 650 feet between buildings and a deep well site, and this is subject to change because it hasn't come up for even advertisement yet. They wanted to change it to, I believe it's measured from the well pad rather than the entire site. And they wanted to be, the last we heard was 750 feet to something about like homes and businesses with a waiver that landowners could sign to go down to 500 feet.
And that's down from a 900-foot recommendation. Is that correct?
1,000
No.
was
1,000.
Oh, geez.
1,000. Okay.
The other question I have is Traditions of America that they're going to be building down here at the old Rose Ridge. 248 units there, I believe. What about the traffic that they'll be having as well? And it looks like it's going to be about the same time if this sticks to the schedule that they have planned.
So one thing that what I'll say about that is what we heard from the traffic engineer during the Dionysus hearing is that, so they look at bottlenecks, typically intersections, right? That's where they kind of grade traffic. Basically, all of the intersections along the haul route are already grade F, which is the lowest possible grade intersections could have. It seemed like they took the position that once you're a grade F, I guess there's no lower grade, so maybe you can't get any worse. So that's for one thing, I guess on the one hand, the roads are public roads. We all use them. Businesses use them. They're not toll roads or anything like that. So they're kind of people's right to use, and businesses for that matter. On the other hand, what Jack brought up about disruptions to the normal flow of traffic, it's really a complicated issue. So whose job is it to make sure our roads have enough flow for us to go anywhere? Is it Olympus's job? Is it the state's job? It's certainly not the township's job on a road that isn't owned by them. So I don't have a great answer for you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Long story short. Do we want to go on to talk about the public hearing? Is there anything else before we move on?
Seems like we're ready to tackle this public hearing stuff.
All right, let's do it.
I think you restarted somewhere in.
Well, this is, we were,
there we are. Okay.
okay, sorry.
I wanted the introduction.
Sorry.
Okay, so the public hearing, February 22nd. It's this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. American Legion Post 593 at 57 Superior Road in Tarentum. This hearing is the most important thing. That said, we do expect it to take more than one session. So if you're not able to attend on February 22nd, pay attention to when the second hearing is scheduled, because things that you needed to do at the beginning of the first session, you will be able to do them at the beginning of the second session if you missed the first one. We don't know how long this one will go. I kind of suspect it won't take 9 sessions like Dionysus did, but in the letter that the township already sent out, they said that they expect more than one session, so the township is prepared for that as well. Okay, now you can move on to the next one. So this is a rough outline of the public hearing process, and for some reason I started it after the part where you ask for party status. So we're going to jump to that in the next slide, but we're going to start. No, just go back. I'm going to do it. I thought through it. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to go with the way it's written. So after parties have requested party status, which we will dig deeper into on the next slide, Olympus is going to present its case. So it's a little bit weird, the public hearing setup, because it's what they call a quasi-judicial proceeding. There will be a court reporter. Our township solicitor, Gavin Robb, will be acting as the hearing officer, which kind of makes him a judge. The Board of Supervisors will be sitting in the front of the room. During the Dionysus hearing, the Board of Supervisors didn't make a peep. They didn't ask any questions. They just sat quietly and paid close attention, we hope. Other hearings that Tim and I have attended since in other communities, the boards were very interactive and took the opportunity to ask questions. So this board is composed differently than the board that heard the Dionysus case. They might behave a little differently in this hearing. We don't know. So Olympus's case will consist of witnesses representing Olympus that have prepared these different parts of their application. So they'll explain their site plans, they'll demonstrate compliance with the West Deer Township Oil and Gas Ordinance and all the other regulations that apply to this site. We have a pretty good idea of who their witnesses will be. So I've listed out the potential Olympus witnesses. We'll have likely a civil engineer from Michael Baker Corporation, because they were the ones that prepared the site plans and the setback exhibits, a traffic engineer from Stahl Schaefer, a sound engineer from Acoustical Controls. Often there's testimony from Olympus Energy's Vice President of Operations, Manny Johnson. And lately at hearings, they've been having Jennifer Hoffman, Olympus's Vice President of Regulatory, Environmental Health and Safety, testify. So after each of these witnesses gives their testimony, which is basically a question and answer period between the witness and the attorney representing Olympus, which will be Babs Callan, party objectors will be able to ask questions of that witness. Then,
if I could jump in real quick.
Sure.
One important thing to remember is that how Joe mentioned, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. So while this is all occurring, there can be objections. So Olympus can object to things that questions that are asked during cross-examination. Objector parties like us can object to things that Olympus does. And that hearing officer, Mr. Robb, our solicitor, is the person who rules on those objections. So don't be surprised by it. Don't be intimidated by it. It's a very normal thing. Don't be afraid of it. If you're cross-examining, which cross-examining is just asking a witness questions. If you're asking questions and Olympus objects to something, you have the opportunity to respond to that objection as to why you think your question deserves to be answered. So feel free to make your case in your own words. If there's objection as to, like, it could be relevance, no foundation. So relevance would be you're asking something that is completely outside of the scope of the hearing. Like, I don't know. I don't want to really think of any examples right now, but that would be, and you can respond. I would encourage you to not just stand there, say nothing, and look at Mr. Rob to rule on the objection without offering, why you're asking the question, why it's of concern to you, and then let him respond to it, whether he sustains the objection or overrules it. If he sustains the objection, that means he agrees with whatever the objection was, and you basically have to move on at that point.
But that being said, you're making it sound like you almost need to be a lawyer.
You're not. Yeah.
Rob is very helpful.
It's very conversational.
He explains what's going on and everything. You don't need to know all these terms. I still don't really comprehend whenever he says an objection is sustained or whatever the other sustained or the other thing. I can't think of what that means off the top of my head. So
Look, he'll probably give you an explanation,
yeah,
and maybe even some advice of, like, well, maybe you can word your question a little bit differently. He was actually, I'll say this, very fair, I thought very good at working with us as regular citizens. I mean, I didn't think he ever made anyone feel shamed or embarrassed. So please don't be afraid to participate in this hearing. This is your chance. If you don't ask these questions now, you probably won't get a chance to ask them again.
Okay, so
sorry, go ahead.
After all that is done, which will be very extensive, then anyone who has party status will have an opportunity to present their own case. And a case can consist of anything from just making a statement to calling witnesses to refute things that Olympus has said or draw out problems with their application. If you obtain party status for the hearing and you want more information about what it means to present a case in chief, how to go about doing that, definitely reach out to us and we can help you, craft your argument and figure out what it is you want to say and how you want to present it. After all those party cases are done, any West Deer residents that did not have party status can give public comment, which is just a 3-minute statement. Then after public comment, the hearing closes and the supervisors have 45 days from the close of the hearing to make their decision. One additional note about public comment is that party objectors are people who are objecting to the application. They have questions and concerns about it. They want to preserve their right to appeal. So they're typically people who are opposed to the application. People who are making public comment might also be opposed, or they might come and make comments and say, everything I heard here was great. I think that we should get started on this right away. So,
or it might be unclear whether they support it or object to it.
It might be unclear.
Sometimes things get a little crazy during public comment.
Yeah. But the thing is, a lot of the people sounds wrong because there weren't many people at these hearings who supported the plans that Olympus had. But the few people who were there for all of the sessions that were supporting Olympus felt very concerned that everyone was against Olympus for session after session after session, and that they were never allowed to speak. And that's just the way it works. The time for people who support the application is during public comment all the way at the end. And so if you have anyone who raises that objection to you about, why is this all, they said it was one-sided, which was weird because, Olympus was in favor of the application. But anyway, I think we can move on to the next. Okay. So probably should have reversed these two, but it's fine. Since we've talked so much about party status, here's how you go about getting party status and why, if you live within a mile of the site, you should probably try to get it. So if you go to the hearing and you hear Olympus's witnesses say something and it sounds strange to you, or you don't understand it and you want to ask a question about it, you have to have party status. If you don't have party status, you will just have to sit there and hope that someone else asks your question. So to question the witnesses, you need party status. To be able to present your own witnesses and to have a significant chunk of time at the end to present your own case, you need to have party status. And if there's any chance that you would want to appeal the supervisor's decision, you have to have obtained party status for this hearing to have a right to appeal. We're advising anyone that lives in West Deer and cares about the outcome of the Leto hearing to ask for party status. We had people come to the Dionysus hearing that lived 4 or 5 miles away and asked for party status. And I think that's terrific. They didn't get it, but the groundswell of public interest in it on that first night, we had 150 people line up to ask for public status, for party status at the Dionysus hearing, and it was granted to about 90. So it means a lot to the community to go and ask for party status, even if you don't get it. But certainly the closer you live, the more seriously you should take this procedural part of the process.
Could I jump in for a second?
Sure.
So party status, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't mean you're an anti-fracking activist. It's just you're exercising your legal right under Pennsylvania law to participate in the hearing. There's no obligation. You can show up and ask for it that first night, decide I'm not coming to any more of these, and never go to another hearing. We would hope you would continue going and stay interested, but you have really no obligations placed upon you asking for being granted party status. It just preserves your right to do certain things during the hearing, and mostly that's asking questions. Also putting on your own case if you choose to do so. So it's not, I mean, it's a big deal having that, exercising your own right, but it's not really a big deal in the whole scheme of things. It doesn't, doesn't brand you as an anti-fracking activist or anything like that. So just want to kind of give you some assurances that doing it is an okay thing to do. You're just exercising your rights, which I encourage everyone to do. Were you going to go into?
I was going to say about how you actually do it.
Yes, go ahead.
Before we move on. Okay, so at the beginning of the hearing, Gavin Robb will ask, is anyone in attendance? Does anyone want to ask for party status in this proceeding? And you will have to go, hopefully they have microphones. We think they will. You'll have to go to the front of the room, state your name and your address, and say how far you are from the Leto well site. If you need help figuring out how far you are from the Leto well, send us an email, give us a call. We can measure the distance easily on Google Earth. In more recent hearings, Babs Calland has been asking for people to point to their house on a map. Tim had an idea that
Babs Calland is Olympus's lawyer.
So if you're comfortable pointing to your house on Mr. Lucas, the Babs Calland attorney's map, that's fine. Tim had the idea that if if anyone wanted to, we could identify their house on the evacuation radius map, and you could just hand that to him. So those are the things that you'll need to tell the township: name, address, and distance from Leto, and then possibly identifying where your home is on a map.
Yeah, you may, if you're asked why you think you will be impacted by this application, you're free to express why, however you think you will be impacted. If you're within those exact evacuation buffer circles, I would encourage you to say, there's been a circle drawn around my home that says I'm in an evacuation zone for this site. So that's a really good reason that you would be granted party status.
Okay, I think we can move on to our last couple of slides here. So we've also talked a lot about the West Deer Township Board of Supervisors. So I just wanted to go over who they are at the present time and a little bit of background information on them. So we have 5 township supervisors at this time. We have Beverly Jordan, the chairperson, Shirley Hollabaugh, vice chairperson, Vernon Frey, who was appointed, David Harrison, who was appointed, and James Smellin. So those appointments were made because there were vacancies on the board before a term had expired. So we have 3 that were elected and 2 that were appointed. Chairperson Jordan is a very big industry cheerleader. She's pictured there holding a sign that says Marcellus Yes at a Allegheny County hearing that was held whenever they were discussing whether or not to lease under Deer Lakes Park. She was obviously in favor of leasing under Deer Lakes Park. Supervisor Jordan works for a company called Backroads Energy that is a subcontractor in the oil and gas industry that provides some sort of landman services. She's registered with the American Association of Land Professionals or something like that, has certification in like figuring out gas leases, basically. She was not the chairman at the last hearing. So that was when they reorganized the board. She became the chairperson, but she was the only supervisor that attended. She attended the most Dionysus hearings. She almost had a perfect attendance record at the Dionysus hearing. She missed one night because she was attending the Shale Insight conference in Erie. So we asked her to recuse herself from the Dionysus proceeding because of her involvement in the industry. She declined and assured us that she would be able to take the application at face value and had not prejudged it. And then she did vote to deny the Dionysus application. Shirley Hollabaugh, Vernon Frey, and David Harrison all have leases with Olympus that I think they're all ones that would be extracted from Leto. Was that what we looked up, Tim?
I believe there's at least potential they will all financially benefit if the Leto goes through.
So the way this works under Pennsylvania law is that you have to have a quorum for your board. So on a board of 5, you have to have 3 supervisors who can vote. So if you have 3 that have conflicts, they cannot all recuse themselves because then you wouldn't have a quorum. So they will all get to vote, basically. Supervisor Harrison did indicate during a previous township meeting this year that he was going to recuse himself because of his leases. That struck us as a little odd because he's not the only one with leases. But we'll have to wait and see what happens with that when the hearing actually starts. And then we just have our last slide here about things that you can do to help. Definitely tell your neighbors that this is happening. Get everyone that you know in Bairdford to come to the hearing on February 22nd. Learn about the Leto site. We've got links to the application. It's all stored on a Google Drive if you want to read through those files. There is a GoFundMe that money has been being raised since the Dionysus decision, and that we're funding any future appeals that might need to happen. And then keep in mind that May 2023 date about meetings for future updates to the West Deer oil and gas ordinance.
Joe, on your previous slide, I didn't know if you said, but Jim Smollen, did you say anything about what
Mr.
how-
Smollen has no leases.
Okay.
And
No connections in the industry that we're aware of.
he's the one that has no industry connections. So if you could have everyone with industry connections recuse, it would be all on Mr. Smollen to make the decision, but that's not the way it works.
I had a question for the setbacks for being included as an objector. Not the setbacks, but the radius they would go. The last time with Dionysus, they went to 1.25 miles, 1/4 miles. Would we expect that they would do that again, or could they change it and say we're going 1/2 mile?
So we don't know. I wish we could, there's every
They can
reason.
change it. I mean, the
Yeah.
answer to the question is they can do whatever they want.
So an important thing to remember is that the legal advice our board receives from their solicitor, Mr. Rob, plays a very large part in how this hearing will go and the decisions that will come out of our board. So it's, generally everyone knows that you follow your lawyer's advice, right? It's a bad idea not to follow your lawyer's advice. So we're expecting consistency because it's the same solicitor. So we would expect the same legal advice to come out of him and go to the board. I mean, that stuff all happens in executive session, so we don't know what was said back then why they decided to go with 1.25 miles. But we'll have to wait and see next Wednesday. It'll be kind of the first exciting decision that happens out of the hearing.
And I think that from observing other public statements that the board has made recently, specifically around considering the new oil and gas ordinance, that there are definitely some areas that some of the board members could be educated by the community. I think it was Mr. Smollen that said, well, they wouldn't put something like this by a school, would they? And, they would put it 650 feet from a school because that's what the setback is. And one of the other supervisors said, well, anyone who would live adjacent to something like this would be getting paid. They would be pooled in the lease and they would be getting money from that. And we know that people that own homes with small yards in Bairdford do not have gas leases. They don't have the option of a gas lease. They're just going to live next to it and get all the noise and the emissions and everything off of it, and they're not going to get paid. So, I mean, these are things that hopefully through public participation will come out through the course of the hearing, and the supervisors will see why they need to make Olympus follow the rules for the development.
I also want to say, and maybe we should have said this earlier, Crowd does not view leaseholders as our enemy or anything like that. They're our neighbors. We have members of Crowd who are leaseholders. They're entitled, just because they signed a lease, they don't give up any rights to participate in this hearing. They can still object to the application. I don't, and Crowd doesn't view it as any indication about, anything about the person who holds the lease. So, I just wanted to get that out there and make that clear. We're happy to have leaseholders among our members, and we're happy to help educate them on how to participate in the public hearing, because like I said, they can object to it just as much as we can.
I think the main thing to remember here is that the township has rules in place, and the rules need to be applied to every resident and every business that operates here equally. If you decided that you were going to put an addition on your house, but you didn't have enough room along the side of your house, and you know, certain things have to be, I think, 15 feet from the property line on the side of your house, you would not be allowed to go and get a building permit to do that without going to the zoning hearing board and getting a variance to reduce that distance. And what has happened with Olympus and other drillers is that they go into communities and they just say, this complies because we told you so. And they don't allow any pushback or scrutiny or anything like that. They tell you what's a building and what's not a building. They need to go through the process, and they need to follow the rules that are in place. And it's just as simple as that. And, you know, they've got buildings that are 300 feet from this site. It legally cannot be resolved by just saying, we're going to approve this anyway. There's a process that needs to be followed. Go ahead, Mary Kay.
Okay, having said that, if there's anybody out there who is thinking of becoming an objector, I would encourage you to do so, because otherwise you're stuck waiting until the end and making a 2-minute public comment, which I think frustrates a lot of people who didn't do that. The other thing I was wondering is they have changed the West Deer Township website. And it used to be that there was a right on the homepage of the website, you could click on a hearing information. Is that still on the website anywhere for the Leto hearing?
No.
No. Okay.
And we don't know what will happen for the Leto hearing. I mean, that was a really nice thing that the township did, just putting all the documents on the website like that so that you could access any of the exhibits that were put in by anyone. We don't know if they're going to do that this time or not.
Okay. Does Tim have access to the original application still?
Yes, that's we have that all on a Google Drive. We
Okay,
can.
so if anyone did want to become an objector and did want to ask questions, you could get copies of maps and things like that through Tim.
Yes.
For
Yeah,
sure.
we're proud. We've put it on Facebook. I think the link is public on Facebook to download or view any of the entire application.
Where would it be under in the Facebook page? Do you know?
Let me see if I can find it. Maybe I can put a link in for you.
Yeah. Put a link in for people, I think, because they might need that. And if you need help next week signing up to be a party objector, I'm sure that there are many people who would be there to coach you through it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we had some people at the Dionysus hearing that were pretty nervous about doing it, but it ended up being okay. It's a very quick public speaking engagement.
Okay, I'm going to put a link in the chat that is I believe it's the Google Drive link. Nope, that's not it. Hold on a second.
And this will be the original application that was submitted. They probably will bring new updated things for some of the items.
Okay, I put the link in the chat. So if you click that Google Drive link, it should have public access. You can view everything. There's folders in there that are named. So like drawings are in tab 4. You can see all their drawings. You can see their sound impact assessment in tab 13.
Vicky has a question, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tim, I wonder if you have a good rapport with Mr. Mader. I wonder if you could ask if he could have that put on that township website as well. I feel like the application should be there since it's something so prominent right now in the township.
I will ask. There's no
Okay.
harm in asking. All he can say is no.
Okay.
Or maybe he'll do it. So
Okay. Thanks.
And I had a last question. Is there any chance that the board will vote on the ordinance changes prior to May?
there's definitely a chance. Or no, wait. I was thinking you said something else. No. So what has happened? First, they have to advertise the ordinance, which they haven't done yet. So we expect them at their. Let's see. This is February. They're not going to have their vote to advertise in the February meeting. So the earliest they could vote to advertise is at their March meeting. The ordinance then has to go to the Allegheny County Planning Commission, which takes at least 45 days. So essentially a 2-month cycle has to happen. So if they advertise in March, April and May is when it would be April, May. So they could vote as early as May, but also maybe not till June. So there's no chance it could happen before May.
Okay, great. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Okay, it seems like we're kind of wrapping up, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off.
Okay.
As soon as I figure out how to do that, I will let you know.
I think if you hit the